extension agent in Millard County. I've done quite a bit of work with pocket gophers, especially a lot of it on farms, and then we've done some kind of around town and in garden and small acreage operations as well. So we are going to talk about a few different things. We're first going to go over identification. This is going to be the most important thing. I get a lot of calls from small acreage farmers and gardeners and everybody else. It says, what is this thing that's eating my plants or causing all this damage? And there's a few different things we're going to look at to kind of identify. Typically, it's either ground squirrels, voles, pocket gophers is the most common. Depending on what part of the state you're in, you might have prairie dogs as well, but that's going to be certainly the least common cause of your problems. So the first one we'll start with is ground squirrels. There's a few different types of ground squirrels to be thinking of. The one that we see most common here in central Utah is called the Townsend ground squirrel. They're small, they have little black eyes, and they've got kind of a shorter bushy tail. Ground squirrels that you see, like a fox squirrel, which we also have, but they're going to be more in your urban areas like Salt Lake and Logan. They've got some fox squirrels, and fox squirrels are much larger, kind of red colored. One good way to tell if you've got a squirrel problem, it's not always going to be a small hole like this one in the picture, but a lot of times out in field crops, and even I've seen it in some homeowners' yards, they'll dig a hole, colony of squirrels, and they'll dig a hole that's like, and they'll put out a lot of dirt. So if you've got an open hole and a lot of dirt in your yard, it could be a squirrel issue. The other thing with squirrels is you're going to see them kind of running around. They like to come out, and that's sort of what they do. So if you're seeing them and you see those bushy tails, you've got squirrels. Like I mentioned here, if you're near alfalfa fields or you have alfalfa yourself, their numbers can rise to over 20 per acre, which causes a lot of damage and a lot of loss. They can do the same thing in vegetable crops. Anything that's going to keep them fed, they can reproduce like crazy. Okay, so voles. This is one that's extremely common. A lot of times you'll see them and you'll notice their damage coming out of winter. They do a lot of their work kind of right at the level of the snow line. So if you've got new trees or shrubs and you notice at the snow line, there's all kinds of little chew marks and they've maybe taken a layer of the bark off, that's probably voles. And then the other really common place to see them is if you've got grass, you'll notice like they make runs in the grass. They go in the same places just over and over and over again. And so you'll see their runs, and that's really, really common as well, especially like first thing in the spring. A lot of times you'll see those runs right when the snow comes off where they've been messing around. A good way to identify voles is by their really big ears, small eyes, and then they've got kind of a short tail. Typical like mice that you see are going to have a little bit longer tail. Although there's a lot of kind of confusion between voles and what it's in your house going to look like. Voles don't typically come inside the house, though. They're a lot more interested in eating grass than trying to get in your pantry. Voles can also reproduce rapidly. Once they're 40 days old, they can start having litters that are usually around 10 in size. So they can reproduce really, really quickly if you're not careful on controlling them. These are pocket gophers. So with pocket gophers, you're gonna see mounds. You'll never see like an open hole with pocket gophers. I shouldn't say never. You're not typically going to see an open hole if you've got pocket gophers, but they will move dirt like crazy and start pushing it out of their holes. So in this picture, you can kind of see on the sides of this gopher's cheek, there's just big fur pockets. And what they do is when they're clawing and moving dirt, they fill those pockets on the side of their face up with dirt. And then they pop out of their hole and they move that dirt out of their face pockets and dump it outside their burrows. So that's kind of how they get around. You can see it even better on this other slide. You can see those little pockets around his face. That's where he stuffs all that dirt and moves it around. And then once full, he'll dump that dirt. These guys are really frustrating to deal with because they cause so much damage. Not only do they just move dirt, but if you've got new trees, like a fruit tree or something, a lot of times you'll see them, they'll come in, they'll chew the roots up, and your tree will actually tip over a little bit. Root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, anything that grows underground. If you pulled it up and you've got gnaw marks in it, a lot of times that's going to be pocket gophers. So keep an eye out for those mounds so that you can get some control on them. This is a little bit more on kind of pocket gopher biology. In warmer climates, like in southern Utah, they'll stay really active and they'll breed year round. Typically, where we've got winter, they're not near as active in the wintertime and they're not going to be breeding. Typically breed more in the spring here and maybe another batch in the summer, and then they don't do that so much in the wintertime. So what we're going to do now, hopefully that helps with some identification. We're going to talk about different methods of control here. There's a few different ways to go about it once you know what you're dealing with. This is called a PERC machine. PERC stands for Pressurized Exhaust Rodent Controller. This is a big one. Basically what this is it's an engine that runs and then you put those tubes down the holes and it pumps CO2 down the holes. So this is going to be a good option if you've got a large amount of grass like sod, or maybe if you're working on an organic operation and you don't want to use other chemicals or pesticides. They do make smaller versions of this machine that'll just treat like a hole at a time. In the trials that we've done and that they've done at some other universities in California, these are really, really effective at controlling pocket gophers. That's where we've seen it the best. We've done some work on it on squirrels, ground squirrels with these. It doesn't work as well. It's because they typically have an open hole, so that CO2 just comes out. It doesn't stay down in the holes near as well as it does with a pocket gopher. So the downside to these machines is that they're pretty expensive, especially a large one like this. A smaller machine that'll just treat single holes is not going to be quite as expensive, and it can still be really effective on a small acreage situation. The Rodenator. So this is one of my personal favorites. Hopefully we can get the watch this video real quick. So that's the Rodenator. basically what the Rodenator does is you stick a tube down the hole and it fills the hole with propane, and then it starts it on fire and blows it up. There are companies that make this machine. There's places you can rent them. I would highly recommend not doing that. We had some farmers in Beaver County uh, that ended up with some workers in the hospital due to burns when they used a Rodenator that got out of control. And then the other thing is it completely blows up your, like, either your hayfield or whatever it is that you're working on. So a Rodenator, while maybe can get some frustration out, I would not recommend using a Rodenator for your control. We'll go over some more bait and chemical options. So bait is probably the best option for voles. It can work really, really well on squirrels as well, depending on your operation, what you're spreading, and the size. Typically, you're going to need to use a bait box, but as long as you're following the label, there are some that on specific acreages you can just spread out, like across the ground, either with like a four-wheeler or even like a hand fertilizer spreader. So just pay attention to the labels. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Make sure you pay attention to the labels. That's important. So some bait is required to only be used underground. That's something to keep in mind as well. Pre-baiting with grain works especially well with squirrels. It works pretty well with voles as well. What this is you'll put out just like a rolled oat or a crimped oat grain, and this gets the animals used to coming in and feeding in that area. And then after that, you'll come in and treat with your poison grain, and they'll come back and feed on that, and then they will die. So pre-baiting works really well there. Phosphide is the best product. Our trials that controls voles. We'll go over a couple other options and specifics with the zinc phosphide. Just make sure that you're really careful when you use it. You do have to have a pesticide license if you're buying quantities over 3 pounds, but at your most farm stores, like a Tractor Supply, IFA, something like that, you can buy quantities less than 3 pounds without a pesticide license. But again, make sure that you're being really careful that someone did not apply zinc phosphide according to the label and ended up killing some people, and that was in northern Utah. You might remember that. Then single feed anticoagulants can be really effective as well. You need to be careful because voles get bait shy really, really quickly. Meaning, if you're giving them a product that takes 2 or 3 feedings, they'll eat it once and then they'll get sick and they won't come back and have it. They will not get a lethal dose. And that's squirrels, that happens with them a little bit, but it's especially true with voles. If they get a little bit sick off something, they will not go back to it. So make sure that you're using a single feed anticoagulant if that's the direction you're going to go. And I've got a list of some of those that we'll go over. So strychnine bait that's a single feed, and it's been kind of most effective in our gopher trials. These hand probes, like in this picture left, is a really, really good way to do it. That's what I use like in my own garden. Basically, you find the mound where you know that you've got a gopher problem, and you'll kind of probe around until you hit the burrow, and you can just kind of feel it. That probe will break through, and then there's a button on the top that you swivel back and forth a couple times, and it's going to drop a couple tablespoons of bait down into the gopher hole, and then you pull the probe out. That gopher will just come in, find strychnine bait, eat it, and then he'll be done. One thing I'd recommend if you're treating with a probe is to knock down the mounds in your treatment area. That way, you know if it's working or not. If you come in and you treat and you knock down all the mounds, and then 2 days later, there's a whole bunch more mounds, I'd say that gopher probably didn't eat your bait. So maybe try and bait again in one of his new mounds. That's just kind of a good way to figure out if they're really getting what you're putting down there. Aluminum phosphide is another one that uh, you need to have a pesticide license to buy. The strychnine grain you can buy in small quantities without a pesticide license, but this one does have a license. Um, Comes in these little bottles, and basically the way it works is you put a tablet into the ground, and then that tablet turns into phosphine gas and spreads out through the burrows. This is one that we've used on gophers, squirrels. We've even had people put it down badger holes before. Um, just make sure you're following the label and being really careful with this one. We've seen kind of varying success in our trials that we've done with it. It does work. I think it works best in like smaller situations if you're just treating a couple of mounds. What I like to do is dig through the mound until I find like a tunnel, and then I'll throw the tablets down the tunnels and seal it back off. And that's kind of how I go about it. And we do see good success there, but it's been less successful when we've done it on large acreage fields. It just takes a lot more time when you're trying to dig out every hole, and then we just haven't had as good of luck with it. So again, I think you need a pesticide license to buy that, and then make sure you follow the label. I mentioned before the single feed rodenticides. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce these because I cannot. They're difficult, but you'll notice the zinc phosphide and the strychnine are both on there. They're both single feed. These are all great ones to use. Most of these you can buy without a license if you're buying small quantities. But if you're looking to get like a 25 or 50 pound bag, you probably do need a pesticide license. So I've thrown in just a couple of pictures. This is some damage. Hopefully you can recognize the critter that caused this. So these are runs. These are runs that are caused by voles. You may have seen them in your lawn or garden areas. Some specifics on managing voles. So you can use just a regular typical mouse trap, and you'll set them in the runways. One thing to keep in mind when you're trapping for voles is you don't necessarily know what direction they're from. So like on this photo, you can see there's kind of 3 main runs. Be a wise idea to set a trap facing each direction. So you need to set at least 3 traps in that section, just so that if they happen to take the other route, they don't come into your trap from behind and just push it around or move it. That's a good way to do it. You can also, some of those baits that you can just spread out, you can bait some stuff in the runways. Oh, I should mention, when you're using traps in the runs, you don't really need to bait them. It's not the bait that's bringing them in. It's just their habit of going through that runway. So bait's not really effective. Set out a mouse trap with nothing, and then you should be fine. With a lot of those baits those single feed baits, they need to be in bait boxes. Those are pretty simple to buy. You can buy them on Amazon or at most farm supply stores. And then all you do is pop open the box, put your bait in there, and then set it aside. And a lot of those are meant to be used like within 100 feet of a building or just inside garages or things like that. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at your labels and buying your different baits. Another thing you can do with voles is exclude them from gnawing. That's one of the big damage things they'll cause on shrubs or trees when they're biting on it. So you need to get like a 1/4-inch hardware cloth or some wire mesh, and then you bury it 6 inches deep and 6 inches high. Or on years like this year, you might want to put it out again in the snow at the snow line where we had so much. And that can be used. It works really well. They can't chew through it. They don't like that. So then they go away and find something else to eat. And you can also do that like in garden boxes, raised beds, or if you've got like just specific areas that are giving you issues with voles, you can place that there and they won't go through it. So this one is kind of tricky if people have seen this before. These are usually caused by pocket gophers. So voles, you'll notice, just run on top of the ground, but because there's been moved and a tunnel made, that's from pocket gophers. These usually happen underneath snow where they're burrowing around and they come up, but not all the way. And then they just kind of build a new tunnel right up on top of the grass there. That's going to be a pocket gopher problem. So if you find that, you know that you need to either bait or trap. Go over a couple of trapping options. So this is a little more on kind of how to trap this plug. You'll notice the picture on the right with the red arrows. The gopher will come up, like I said before, and deposit that dirt on his mouth. So if he's doing that in one direction, you know his burrow probably goes the other direction. So I like to start digging kind of the direction of that bottom red arrow, because I know that that's likely where the gopher's burrow goes. And then when he goes down that hole, he typically hits the bottom. Usually it's around a foot. Sometimes it's only 6 inches, sometimes it's 18 inches. But usually he goes down somewhere in that 1 foot range, and then he'll tee off his tunnel and it'll split and go 2 different directions. So if you're having a hard time finding like a burrow or his tunnel with your probe, you can just use a shovel and dig that out. And then when you see the tunnel that splits and goes 2 different directions, you can stick your probe down there, put some bait on one side, put some bait on the other. And that's a good way to get in there. The other thing you can do is set a trap, kind of similar to voles. You don't know which direction the gopher's coming from, so you'll set a trap on each side. And I've got some examples of the best gopher traps we've used from the trials here in Utah. Coming up in just a second. So this diagram kind of shows different ways to set a trap. Like I mentioned before, my favorite way to do it is to dig the out with a shovel and then set a trap going each direction, rather than setting it in the lateral. Popping up to make this. You'll also notice in that picture that they've staked their traps. The reason they do that is because if that gopher finds those traps and digs around it, well, he tries to fill in his tunnels and then he'll like back out of there and find a new place. So you're going to come in the next day and there's going to be like a foot of dirt all over your traps, and they're really difficult to find if you don't stake them out. So make sure that you use some wire to hook onto your trap, and then put I've seen people put big jugs on. I've seen them put stakes in, or like sprinkler flags, just so that they can find their traps again if the gopher gets around them. This is one of the most effective traps we have. In the trials, it's performed extremely well. It's called the Gophinator trap, and they're like $6 or $7 a piece. There's another trap that they make that I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's really similar to this, and it's green. When you're doing these gopher traps, you don't have to bait I don't bait any of my gopher traps. I just set them out, and as long as they're in those correct tunnels, the gopher's going to come through there. He hits the bar, and the trap snaps and squeezes him in half. That's just kind of how those work. The Gophinator, the reason they got such high scores in our trials is they were really effective. First of all, they didn't like go off and not catch a gopher. And then the other thing is they're really quick and easy to set, and you can just keep reusing them over and over again. They didn't break. So we really liked those ones. Other one called the Gopher Hawk. This works well in if you only need to buy a couple. These are like $30 to $35 a piece, so they're a little more spendy. $6 ones, they do work really well. So what you'll do is you'll find like a mound, and usually there's a couple area, and then you'll start probing with the probe that's included that you see there. Find where their burrow is. You push down the spring and you set that trap so that it's in their burrow. And on the picture on the left, you'll see there's just a little bar that's coming out of the bottom of the gopher hawk. That's like a hair trigger. So when the gopher runs through there, he'll activate that trigger, and then that spring will suck the trap back up into itself and catch the gopher that way. We've these are these have been tested, and they're really, really effective. They're really quick to set, and they work really, really well. The only issue we have with these is that they're really expensive. So, I mean, if you had a lot of acreage to treat and you needed to buy, like 50 of these traps, that's at $35 a piece. That adds up really quick, and I'd recommend you go with the other traps. But if you just need a couple, these do work really, really well.
You guys right now is I'm going to go over some of our resources on different rodents and other vertebrate pests. So this is our extension.usu.edu/pests. If you go to our fact sheets, we'll add some more on here. I'm sure Kaylin's working on writing some more about gophers and stuff, but we have different fact sheets. So these are good literature. So for example, here's the one on voles. So this is a good review, a lot of what Kaylin just taught us. And you can find all the different bait products and then the non-chemical management options as well for voles and then various other pests. And then if you go to our educational videos tab, you can find some more content on, I think Kaylin did this video on pocket gophers and then the Paiute ground squirrels. So you guys can review that. Again, that's on our educational videos page.